Uncle Doug?
Uncle Dan.
Go to hell.
You go to hell.
Okay, we'll both...
Moving on.
Come on, fellas. You can all go to hell.
Oh, yay. It's a hell. There's a hell for everybody.
It's literally a hell. There's a lid for every pot.
Yes.
And there is a hell for everybody. And
Uncle Mark, you're gonna teach us about a hell? You're gonna take us to hell?
I'm gonna take us south of the border.
And here I am without a handbasket.
Well, we can pick one up along the way. So, guys, we spend a significant amount of time uncling around in the religious absurdities of the so-called Western or Old World canon.
Sure.
Right? Meaning stories from whichever version of the Bible Doug is speed dating at the time. Assorted Greek stuff, having a laugh about Mormonism and Scientology, etc. And sure, it's all fun, and it's a target-rich environment. But remember, the Abrahamic religions and their ghastly offspring are far from the only crazy ideas out there. And they aren't the only ones with concepts of the afterlife that merit a look-see. So, if you guys remember, as I mentioned way back in episode 25, when I talked about the peculiar gods called the 400 Boys, Mayan stuff has a special place in my heart, which I'm now just realizing is a very on-brand organ to hold all of my nostalgic Mayan sentiments in. So... today I want to talk about the extremely unpleasant Mayan underworld / afterlife, Xibalba. It's an amazing story and just a cool word.
I just love that you said it, and both Doug and I looked at each other and went, there's a joke there, but neither of us can come up with it.
I thought it was a Ricky Martin song. Xibalba? Or is that She Bangs?
So it's spelled Xibalba, which doesn't matter half a cup of spit because it was never meant to be written in our alphabet. But I think it's cool anyway. So, before we dive into the madness of this Mesoamerican hell, it's nothing short of a long list of secular miracles that we have any info about it at all. Because after Conquistador Pedro Alvarado pranced into Guatemala in 1524 and informed the locals that all their shit belonged to Spain now via killing nearly everybody, the already deeply diminished Mayan kingdoms were culturally wiped out. The remoteness of some highland villages preserved the language, etc., but for the most part, the Mayan way of life was no more. So it's rather incredible that about 175 years later, when a priest named Father Jimenez arrived on the scene of the crime, that there was an oral tradition of Mayan myth and culture left for him to write down.
Yeah.
Even more miraculous that there was a Catholic cleric willing to give two shits about recording a culture that all of his co-religionists were trying to destroy with both hands.
Now, how convinced are we that this wasn't just some Mayan villagers fucking with him?
Well, in very much like, who was that we were talking about that time?
It was I forget, but the whole thing could possibly it was the Hopi.
The Hopi, that's
talking
right.
about their afterlife and their religion could have all just been them fucking with the
anthropologist, right? And the anthropologist is like, just so you know, they might have been fucking with me.
Exactly.
Right? Which would be beautiful.
Which is always the case.
So
I think that's a blanket statement across all anthropology. You guys, they could just be fucking with us.
Well, and I think that's a great question. I do think that there have been, there's so little left of the Mayan writing, except in their massive monumental architecture. But I think there are corroborating fragments.
Yes.
To what I'm about to tell you. So, Mayan history was recorded in, I use air quotes, books or codices, which are these really beautiful bifold, kind of flat plaster and bark scrolls that are covered with glyphs on both sides. And the Spanish burned all they could get their hands on, sometimes in these massive bonfires of hundreds and hundreds of these codices.
The Spanish could not abide words they couldn't read.
And they were chilly.
Well, you could catch a cold.
Because there's one thing about the Yucatan, it is cold. So they burned all they could, and they came very close to annihilating one of the world's most unique civilization stories about itself. And I think there are less than 10 of these codices left in the world.
Wow.
Whether partial or complete. So, even crazier is that Father Jimenez's single handwritten copy of this massive oral history survived revolutions, several changing of hands, a theft, selling and reselling, and then nearly disappearing forever in dusty obscurity at the back of a private collection in, I think, Pennsylvania.
Dusty Obscurity, by the way, is my drag name.
I love Dusty. She's a curvy gal.
She is.
But
Not a handsome woman.
she's a handsome woman. But she's striking in the right light.
Yes, indeed.
Near darkness. I've seen you in drag.
You have indeed.
Yeah. We'll talk about that on another segment, and that'll be another hell. But after that series of fortunate events...
For whom?
What we know as the Popol Vuh, translated as the Book of the People, exists to edify and amuse our podcast audience. So, the Popol Vuh is a history and mythology of the Quiche Mayans of Guatemala. If you know anything about Mayan civilization, you can correctly guess it's a complicated and bloody tale. Mayans, or to our Mormon friends, lapsed Jews, were nothing like the Catholic conquistadors that appeared on the scene to steal their shit, enslave whoever they could, and kill those they couldn't. But they did share a common belief in blood magic, that the soul and life itself was transported in the blood, and that the ritual spilling and consuming of blood was to commune with the gods. And they shared a bleak and dismal view of the afterlife, so it's hard to believe that they didn't get along. So the story of the underworld of Xibalba is a large portion of the Popol Vuh. Mayan cosmology was very complex and sophisticated. They are believed to be the first civilization on Earth to conceive of the concept of zero.
Yes.
They were unrivaled astronomers and mathematicians.
Wait, so how many civilizations before them had come up with the number 0? You can't say it. Get it?
It's impossible. Yeah, it's impossible to say. Less than one. So anyway, they could predict, recurring astronomical events like comets and that sort of thing, hundreds of years into the future. Their art and architecture were madly brilliant, etc. But unlike the Judaic ideas from the Eastern Mediterranean and the Levant that placed God above man, man above nature in a vertical axis, theirs was much more horizontal. They saw humanity as very much just another cog of birth and death in the brutal cycles of nature, and the gods, personifications of those cruel forces, as just another set of mouths that needed to be fed and appeased. Where Christians despise nature as cursed and vile, and man's natural self as debased, the Mayans saw life and death, and the beyond as the natural struggle to survive, and the inevitability of that failure to survive. So, also, like the Mesopotamians and the early Greek ideas of death and the afterlife, which we'll talk about it in segments another time, no accumulation of great deeds or dreadful sin made a lick of difference in the Mayan underworld. Kings and corn farmers were fucked in equal measure. So after the pain and daily trials of mortal life, a new set of even more hideous challenges awaited everyone in Xibalba.
Oh, how fun!
Yeah, it's seriously, you just started at 0. Didn't matter what you did or who you were.
So egalitarian, the Mayans.
They were very egalitarian.
So they came up with 0.
Because that's where we all start. After we die.
Maybe it was a spiritual rather than a mathematical invention. So because of just the topography and geological forces, much of the Mayan world is dotted with these vertical caves that have turned into freshwater cisterns called cenotes. These were believed to be the entrances to the very real underworld of Xibalba. So at the same time the Mayans depended on the cenotes for their water supplies, they were terrified by them. I guess much like Mormon missionaries aren't supposed to go swimming. Right? The devil controls the cenote. So the great Mayan cities, places like Palenque and Chichen Itza and Copan, all have these weird rectangular kind of stadium-looking things with these big broad lawns that have angled walls on their long axis. So these fields are for an insane ball game called Pok-to-Pok, which involved using one's hips, shins, and shoulders to try to get a 9-pound natural rubber ball through a stone hoop up on the walls. So
wow.
Yeah, it's I can't even imagine that was possible, but such was the game.
We've seen a couple of those.
Well, I've seen the one at Copan. I don't know if I've seen another one, but I don't know if there was one at Quirigua. But anyway, it seems the goal was not only to get the ball through the hoop, but letting the ball hit the ground could lose you the game. And since the game was often a life or death contest, losing the game could mean losing your head, or your heart, or both. Either way, you're fucked.
Or your big rubber ball.
Or you take your ball and your head and go home. Anyway, the reason I bring up the ball court is because Mayans believed the lords of Xibalba lived right underneath them. And the game itself was a huge part of the story of Xibalba. So, speaking of the 12 lords of this wonderful underworld, And by the way, different scholars put the number of lords between 9 and 14, but who cares? They sound like a real picnic on a sunny summer afternoon. The boss lords are called One Death and Seven Death.
Okay.
And the rest of their gruesome group have names like Flying Scab and Gathered Blood, who give people blood maladies. Pus Demon and Jaundice Demon, who cause bodies to swell and rot. Bone Staff and Skull Staff, who make people into skeletons. My favorites. Sweepings Demon and Stabbing Demon, who hide in the unswept corners of people's houses and stab them to death. Sweeping was critically important in the Mayan world, apparently.
Yeah, I guess.
Yes.
And finally, Wing and Packstrap, who cause random travelers to cough up blood and die on the road.
Wow.
Those sound pretty terrible, but by far the scariest one is Seven Death. And why is 7 so scary? Because 7, 8, 9.
Oh, God.
You're welcome.
for fuck's
I'm
sake.
out.
Oh, my God.
Bye, guys.
Kindergarten jokes. So imagine what the Christmas parties the Lords of Xibalba have. There is no good Secret Santa option. Do not go to their parties. Okay, so now we've met the cast. Let's get a look at the scenery. Much like the world above, Xibalba was a vast landscape of mountains, rivers, temples, etc. But because it's a spooky place, Xibalba literally translates to place of fright. The rivers are blood and pus, the temples are deadly traps, the forests are full of spinning knives, etc. Xibalba sounds like one of our patron heavens.
It's suddenly the Indiana Jones movies are making more sense.
It sounds like the movie Krull. Is what it sounds like.
Well, Kroll also invented the zero. So,
yes, it's true.
So upon a Mayan's sweet relief from their rather dangerous daily rigors and grind of mortal life, their spirit would enter Xibalba via the most convenient local cenote or cave, then find themselves having to cross first a river of scorpions, then a river of blood, then a river of pus. River of Pus, by the way, was my first English language techno folk album. Didn't sell a single copy. Anyway, if one made it across these liquid horrors, one would then have to choose the right path at one of many crossroads, and if you survived all of that, you would arrive at the house of the Lords of Xibalba. For some reason, they had these weird mannequins of themselves made to humiliate the dead, so you'd go in and start appealing to one of them, but it was a mannequin, and the rest of them would laugh.
Oh, great Lord. Yeah. And then they'd all be like,
yeah.
He doesn't even know.
So once you were properly belittled, you'd be invited to sit. But the bench would be a scorching hot stove.
They get you every time with that one.
So everybody would have a good laugh, and then you were sent off Running Man style to even deadlier amusements. And those amusements were 6 houses. Here we catch a glimpse of the universality of the idea of what we call hell across so many of the world's religious cultures. First was Dark House, with an impenetrable darkness. The second was Rattling House, an impossibly cold place with freezing hail, a little like the baroquely detailed Buddhist hell Naraka that we talked about in episode 7, where there's an entire plane of hell called Tuk 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 Tuk, because that's the sound of people's teeth chattering. The third house was called Jaguar House, a place crawling with ravenous jaguars, which I suppose is the final stop for cat fanciers like Uncle Doug.
I'm envisioning this street with these houses on it.
Yeah,
this is kind of, you're walking down and you move from house to house.
Well, to me, it's kind of like a Halloween haunted house.
Yeah. Where you keep going into the different rooms, and you know somebody's going to jump out and startle you, and you're just
decapitate you.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's the Jaguars. Okay.
So after you leave Jaguar House, the fourth house is called Bat House, a place full of deadly bats and one eccentric billionaire who makes them the talisman for his pain and revenge and assumes their identity to fight absurdly characterized villains in a dismal post-industrial cityscape. The fifth house is called Razor House.
Oh.
Obsidian blades whirl about in the air unpredictably.
But it's a great place to kill the White Walkers if you need to.
Yeah, exactly, and get a shave. And finally, a house of pain very close indeed to the loving Christian heart, the House of Heat, filled with fire and unimaginable warmth.
I just want to know, what happens if you get to the River of Scorpions and you're just like, nah,
I'm going to go back.
I'm not going to do it.
I don't know.
I've decided against, or, any of the things. At some point, what if you just stop?
The Popol Vuh is not heavily footnoted that way.
No.
So,
I just want to know who's prodding me to do this. I'll stay in the river of blood. I'm fine with that.
and there's never
It's nice.
It's warm.
Just floating around.
And when you get to the end of the kind of the Xibalba story, there's no real reward for having survived all these things. It's just
So there's no reward. There's no spur. That
it's. I think it's a worldview that life is just fucking
life
pain.
is just shit.
It's shit,
And then you die, and then there's more shit.
and then there's more shit.
It just keeps going.
And I think to your point, Uncle Dan, it's not that you choose to go forward through these things,
Right.
but like a haunted house, you're kind of seated on a cart that's moving forward through these things.
Oh my
Right,
god!
or it's just the crush of people behind you that are pushing you forward.
You
right?
keep yelling back. Stop!
So I actually tried to.
It doesn't get better.
It's a
Just
river of
stop
pus.
pushing.
And I actually tried to look up what happens if you die during these. Like,
Yeah.
do you die and go through it all again like Donkey Kong, or or if you get killed here, do you finally just get to flee these awful dual lives of pain and just fucking die for good? Which seems, if that was the case, I would dive right into the River of Scorpions
Yeah.
right off the bat and be done with it. So,
And then you have to start over.
so there is one story of heroes triumphing over the tests of Xibalba, but only because, like Captain James Tiberius Kirk and the Kobayashi Maru, they cheated. It's a crazy tale, so here it is very briefly. One fine Mesoamerican day, a god named Hunapu and his brother were minding their maze when they were lured to Xibalba to play a game of Poctopoc, with the devious lords of the underworld as the opposing team.
Oh wow.
They were tricked, and Hunapu was decapitated. His severed head was placed in a tree, which instantly sprung to life because he was a god. One of the lesser lords of the underworld, Blood Maiden, was passing by when the head lured her over and spit into her hands. From this, she became pregnant and gave birth to the twins Xibalanque and Hunapu.
Right.
Here again, like our Christian friends, the Mayans clearly had no clue how human reproduction works.
Also, this is the exact plot of Space Jam.
Is it really?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Space Jam 2.
Electric Boogaloo.
More jam. One day, the boys, master ball players, these twin boys, angered the gods with too raucous a game of Poctopoc. And remember, the House of the Lords is right under the ball court. So the angry lords summoned the boys to the underworld, where they played game after game with the treacherous lords, but bested them every time. Infuriated, the lords set upon the twins to kill them, but the twins leapt into a fire, killing themselves. How this was better, I have no idea. But the gods of the earth and sky were pissed, so they hit the reset and brought the twins back to life. So they returned to Xibalba, dressed as dancers, and basically fucked with the lords until they were able to trick them into letting them kill them because they said they had this really cool resurrection trick. So then they didn't use the trick, left them dead, took all their treasure and shit, stole a canoe, and went back into the mortal world. So we may do the whole hero twin story properly another time, but it's kind of impossible to tell the story of Xibalba without it.
I'm pretty sure that was actually the plot of Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, wasn't it?
I
think
didn't
it
know you
was.
could cross a river of scorpions on a canoe.
It's a very special canoe. Yeah, it's got a very thick skin. So now, as our astute listeners surely know, Xibalba is more than just the gruesome underworld of a nearly lost civilization. But just as famously, it's an American hardcore metal band from beautiful Pomona, California. Let us close our strange meditation on this exotic afterlife with the final chorus from their 2012 Not Smash single, Sentenced. I heard screams. I covered my ears. I saw your tears. I looked away. Sentenced, imprisoned in this mind. Sentenced, no end in sight. Place of fear, place of tears. Only the devil dwells here. Consumed by the streets, consumed by anger. No end in sight. Overwhelmed in this prisoned mind.
Poetry.
Really makes you think, I guess.
Yeah.
I was waiting for them to talk about blowing bubbles in the river of pus, but they didn't do it.
I didn't use that particular song.
Oh, okay, that was another verse.
Bubbles in the River of Pus, because it's an instrumental. There's
Right,
no lyrics,
yeah.
so that's Xibalba, guys.
There it is.
Theremin instrumental.
We can throw that on the pile of hopeless, terrible afterlives.
Yeah, wow, that was I'm kind of glad the Spaniards got rid of that culture. That it's depressing.
Yeah, the Catholic afterlife is far superior.
Far better. Far better. Well, at least there's a chance of like something less miserable.
But I would say in the Mayan afterlife, there are sports entertainments.
Well, at least there's basketball, so that's nice.
There's weird basketball. So that's Xibalba, everybody. Try not to go there.
Moving on.